would.
Now, joining me now is one person who has said in the past that the foundation should return that money. The author of Take a Stand, 2016, Republican presidential candidate, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul with us. You're one of the few that have targeted that, as I have. Saudi Arabia, Oman, Kuwait, UAE have atrocious human rights records for women, gays and lesbians. She says she's the champion of these different groups. Meanwhile, she's never uttered a word about how bad these records are. Did they buy her silence, you think?
Well, the thing is that it's so bad in Saudi Arabia that a woman was raped there by 7 men, and the woman was publicly whipped. The woman was actually then put in prison for being in the car with an unmarried man. And that's the kind of country and that's the kind of culture that she's taking money from. It's going to be very hard for her to run as the candidate for women's rights when she's taking money. You know, she took money from the Sultan of Brunei, where adultery is punished by stoning. It's going to be hard to be the champion of women's rights when you're taking money from these places.
Yeah.
So no, I think it really is going to be difficult for her.
Taking money, and then if she took it but still took a principled stand, maybe you could give her a pass. I can't find any instance where she has criticized the policies of these countries with these atrocious records. That, to me, it seems like they bought her silence.
And I think it's even worse than that. We're going to have a race to be commander-in-chief. And do we want her to be the commander-in-chief when she's taken money from people who allowed, you know, she basically presided over the sale of a uranium company to the Russians while taking money from the shareholders of the uranium company. So I would think that that really should disqualify her from being a candidate.
You have a whole lot of reasons. The server would be another reason. The handling of Benghazi or the $26 million the Clinton Foundation got in Sweden while they were petitioning her as Secretary of State so that they can get an exemption and continue to trade and do business with Iran while everybody else was, living by the sanctions in place.
And about this time, I believe Bill Clinton gave a speech for that company and got about $700,000 while they were applying for an exemption from the sanctions against Iran. Something's really fishy. I think Bill Clinton also got money from a bank that was lobbying over the uranium deal. So there's a lot going on here. There's an endless supply of conflict of interest, and that's why her numbers as far as honesty, dishonesty are upside down.
Yeah, Roosevelt Island, I don't know how much you know about the history. It was a fairly interesting choice to make her announcement. Did you see that?
I did see that.
But with its history, I think it's interesting. Let me go to Jeb Bush today. Jeb announces he's the latest candidate to announce. Obviously does pretty well in some of the polls, as you've been doing well, especially in head-to-head polls against Hillary. What do you make of Jeb Bush's announcement and his candidacy?
You know, I think the more the merrier. We have a really competitive field on the Republican side, and I think the question will be, will we get a conservative candidate, or will the conservatives divide the vote and we'll get a moderate candidate? And that's the debate we have as we've been choosing presidential nominees really for the last several cycles. But I think actually we need a strong standard bearer who is a conservative, and I think we actually need to be more boldly for tax cuts, more boldly for cutting regulations, and more boldly for balancing the budget. And I'm afraid if we get a big government Republican, that may be the wrong message, and we may not be able to separate ourselves so much from Hillary Clinton at that point.
You know, it's interesting. Lindsey Graham is getting into the race, and I don't think he has a very big chance of winning. He's not showing up really in the polls in any big way. Why do I suspect that he might be trying to get into this race to cause a little trouble in South Carolina? Have you thought about that?
You know, you never know, but I think that if Lindsey Graham splits the moderate vote with Bush, that maybe a conservative could win South Carolina. So actually, I think having another moderate like Lindsey Graham in the race is actually probably good for conservatives.
Okay. Rand Paul, good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.